Hi, hey, hello. This is Module 6C, entitled Inversions. The root of my chord is not in the bass. I strongly advise that if anything in the past few modules with major and minor key Roman analysis and just chord identification has been struggling for you, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I totally am so insecure with that. Going on to this lesson is not going to help. I feel like it might just make things a little bit worse for you. So if you have that issue, please shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to schedule a time to meet with you guys via Zoom. Just whatever you need help with, I'm here for. So let's continue with this. We have inversions. What is an inversion? The thing that I've been talking about for so long. So recently, all of the work that we have covered has been in root position, meaning that the root of the chord is in the bass voice or the lowest voice. So when we were looking before, when we had our grand staff, I'm just gonna draw out a fake grand staff over here, right? Oh my goodness. Right, so I have this grand staff, right, and I have my bass clef on the bottom, staff, treble clef on the top, right, and if I had something that looked like C, wrong clef, C, G, E, and a C, right, I know that, I'm in C major, right, the root of my chord, a C, is in the bass voice, which is my lowest voice. So here you have just a major 1 chord, right? C, E, G. But there's going to be times where we're changing the order of the notes in a chord, and you have the compositional makeup of this major 1 chord, but your root of the chord, C, is not found in the bottom. Perhaps you have a G in the bottom, right, and you have a C, E, G, C type thing. Essentially, I'm just switching the notes around, but it's still a 1 chord. It just is going to have a fancy symbol next to it to indicate this is 1 chord, but my root of the chord is not in the bass. So if it wasn't stressed enough, the bass voice or the lowest voice in the bass clef staff is not necessarily always the root of the chord. The root of the chord is what Roman numeral is linked, what Roman numeral is linked to, like a chord. So like in the key of C major, C is 1, anything built on D. So if you had an E chord, right, you have an E, you'd have a G, B, and we'll do another E, right? So you have E, G, B. And we know in the key of C major that C, D, E, the E is the root, right? We have E, G, and B. And when we're looking at this, that's our bottom note. And we know that this would be a minor 3 chord in the key of C major. You have that E, G, and B natural. So the Roman numeral refers to the root of the chord, and usually, like, all the stuff that we've been doing in root position is super easy to acknowledge, like, what the Roman numeral is, because that root is in the bass voice, root position. So now we're going to make it spicy and switch up the order of our notes. Prior to me doing this and making you feel like, oh my goodness, why am I in misery right now? Well, it's because we have inversions for 2 reasons, which you might not even realize you're listening to inversions in the music that you're listening to on a daily basis, because inverted chords allow for a greater range of tonal sonority. So that means that, we could always be playing a C major chord, right? So you have root position, you could have, these are all the same notes. They all contain that C, E, and G in them. It's just the order of what notes you have are in a different order. So that's a more advanced thing to be able to listen for. But, sometimes you're going from like a 1 chord to a 6 chord, and it's just a really far jump away. So composers, to allow for greater flexibility of the bass line, the composer will write in a different note in the bass to keep it more smooth. So this is an example that's found in the textbook, and we can see that there's a lot of great leaps in the bass voice. So with inversions, we'd be able to make this a smooth bass line, which is always what we're looking for, usually within a couple of steps within each other. So over here, you're starting on a B and then going up to a G. Oh, I'm in the wrong key. I'm in B minor. So over here we have and then we're going to G, D, and B. You're going up to the B, C, D, E, F, G, your 6th chord, right? And instead, here I have a B5, 2 B naturals and F for my 1st chord, right? And then if I changed what note was on the bottom, instead of going from, I could just choose either that D or another B, like if I were to put a B on the bottom. So you have, so this is my 1st chord, right? And then what's written for your 2nd chord is this, which is like a really big jump. You're almost changing the sonority because of what you had before was so big. So instead, you could do something like this. Instead, what I'm going to do is play another B and then another G. Or actually, I'll keep my 2 Bs there, and then I'll change this to a G and a D. I'm just showing you different possibilities that you could have, because right now, my fingers are really spread out on the piano. I'm like, whew, this is kind of rough. So I'm going to play the 1st chord, and then I'll play the 2nd chord of what I wrote, essentially the inversion, containing the same notes in a different order. So you have this to start. And then all I'd have to do is shift. Essentially, I don't know if that really made any sense. If it didn't, I'm sorry for my blubber, but I thought that maybe that would be helpful for you to be able to see. So there's several different types of inversions that we have. We have root position, which is what we've been doing. We know the root is in the bass. We're just going to write out the Roman numeral for that. We have something called first inversion, where you have the 3rd in the bass. You have a 2nd inversion with the 5th in the bass, and a 3rd inversion, which is the 7th in the bass, which, please note, that can only occur within 7th chords, meaning that you have a 7th above the bass. So, if I were to show you this, what these inversions look like, I'm going to stick with my C major, right? So if I look, in C major, my 5 chord, right, is G. So a 5 chord would be G, B, and D, right? I know this is the root, this is the 3rd, this is the 5th, and we'll go into a 7th in a minute. But just my triad, right? A 5 chord triad. You have your root, 3rd, and 5th. Now, this is in root position. You could also have a first inversion, which we stated before, which is your 3rd is in the bass. So that's going to be your lowest voice. So you'll have a B, D, and then say a G, right? Instead of. So we're still going to write a 5 chord, because when you write this down again, right, we have a root, 3rd, 5th, and then root on top. And if you were to write this in a closed position, you would be able to see that G, B, and D. And you'd be able to see, well, I have a root, right? But my 3rd is on the bottom. And when I write this out, I have this really nifty table that you can use for yourself as well. But I'm going to write a 6 next to it to indicate that my 3rd is in the bottom when I have my first inversion. Essentially, these numbers show the distance between whatever's on the bottom and, like, your top note, like these numbers. So over here you have 1, right? If I'm starting on the third, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the space of 6 intervals below, and then you have a third between the root, or like the base, your third, and your fifth, right? So technically it would be 6, 3, but you have the interval of a 6. You don't have to know that reason behind it, but that's essentially how I'm getting these random numbers. I'm stemming them from the relationship between the lowest bass note and the root and the other notes there. Then we have second inversion, right? And that is when we have, I'll write in the bass, we have the root in the bass. Here we have the third in the bass here, and for second inversion, we have the fifth in the bass. So that means that we're going to have a D in the bass, a G, and a B, right? So if I'm looking over here, I write it into a closed position. I have a 5, root, third, root, third, fifth, right? My closed position kind of home base. And you could see here that your fifth is not the root, and the root is not in the bass here. And if I were to write out the Roman numeral, this would still be a 5 chord because you still have all the ingredients to make that 5 chord, right? You just have a 5 on the bottom, and we're going to write 6, 5 next to it. So essentially this looks like this, 5, 6, 5. And we get that because between the fifth and the bottom and the root, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Between the bottom and the top note, right? And then you have an interval of a fifth between 1, 2, 3. You know, why does that not make sense? You have a G, B, and a D, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Haha, because it's not a 6, 5, it's a 6, 4. Oh, silly me, it's been such a long day. My apologies. So you have a 5, 6, 4 there for second inversion. So this is only in relation to triads. When you have a seventh chord, we're going to have a different layout of notes. But for what we're doing right now, root position, right? You have C, E, G. Your root is in the bass. The root is your lowest note. In first inversion, you have your third is in the bass as opposed to your root, right? And you'll write a 6 next to that because you have a triad. We're only dealing with 3 notes right now. And then second inversion, your fifth is in the bass. So you have, and you'll write 6, 4 next to that. So essentially, you're still keeping the same ingredients to create a 5 chord. All of the pitches are still remaining the same, but your extra Arabic numerals next to the note will change. So these are only for triads. And then when you have a seventh chord, it will be a little bit different. This is all in that table as well. So we have the same thing here. If I were to write out the seventh chord, you have G, B, D, and F, right? So that's in root position. Notice our root position. We have just the seventh added. That's the only thing that changes from the triad. Then, if we were to have that root, third, fifth, seventh, right? Now, same thing, first inversion. What scale degree is in the bass? If you said third, you are correct. So we're going to put our thirds in the bass. So that's our B, and we'll have a D, F, and a G. It won't always be spelled out, you know, having your third, 5, 7, and root like that. You know, you might have the third, the seventh, the root, and the fifth. It doesn't really matter. I'm just looking for, can you identify within this chord, making it into a closed position, what pitch is located on the bottom? So here, you have a 5 chord, right? We have all of the notes, but your third is in the bass. And if we're looking, now we have even more intervals to look at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? I'm not even going to put that, I'm going to put that 6 to represent between the root and the third, right? Because I'm just counting up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. line, space, line, space, line, space, or space, line, space, line, space, line, whatever, right? So we have that 6, which is the first one, and then we have 5, which is between the 3rd and the 7th scale degree. And I'm not going to put the 3 below it to indicate between the 3rd and the 5th. We don't always need to have a 5th. So you just have that 6, 5 there with your 3rd in the bass. So the only thing that differs, I guess, in terms of your Arabic numerals is that you're adding a 5 below. So 7th chords reposition, you have 5, 7. And then a 5, 6, 5 would sound like this with your 3rd in the bass. You have that crunchy 2nd there between the 7th and the root. And then we have 2nd inversion, which guess what? Pitch is in the bass. If you said the 5th, you would be absolutely correct. And my 5th is a D, so I'm going to do a D and F. I'm going to do a B and a G. Here, wait. I'm going to do it D, F, G, B. Perfect like that. And then I can see that I have my root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th, right? I can see my 5th is clearly in the bass. And if I were to write out a chord for that, I still have all the ingredients of a 5 chord. I just didn't add them into the mixing bowl at the same time. So over here we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right, between the 5th and the 3rd. But we actually don't write that out. We keep this as a 4, right? Because you see between 1, 2, 3, 4, and then between the 5th and the root, right? And then between the 5th and the 7th, you have a 3rd, right? 1, 2, a space, line, space, right? Because we're counting that primary pitch as 1. So that's 2nd inversion. And then special only for 7th chords, when you have 4 distinct notes, the 7th can be in the bass. And you know this is going to be a 5, 4, 2. And you'll have the 7th in the bass, which is an F, and you'll have a G, B, D. Built below it, you have the 7, root, 3rd, 5th. And the numbers come the same way. If you were to look between the 7th and the 5th, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to disregard that. You have your 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Between the 7th and the 3rd, and then between the 7th and the root, you have a 2nd. And that's how we get that 3rd inversion. So if I were to play all of these simultaneously, you have C, E, G, B, your 5, 7, your 5, 6, 5, 5, 4, 3. You would have the 5th in the bass. And then with your 7th in the bass, you'd have an F, right? So this is all strictly either for voicing or to create less leaps in the bass line, and any other lines. So like in terms of music composition, we don't want to create these crazy soaring lines, especially when you're writing for 4 voices, particularly in a quartet or a choir setting. You don't want somebody's part to be too confusing or overlap with other voice parts, so we like to try and keep them nice and smooth. So inversions help us do that. I didn't quite go over this slide, but I thought it might be helpful to review it after. So how do we write an inversion? Inversions are written using Arabic numerals. They are indicated by the intervals stacked over the bass note. Inversions are written based upon their intervals upon the bass note. We do not write out all of the intervals next to our notes. You could take a minute and pause and read those. However, you could also just look at this inversion symbol chart, which you will get for every other quiz, to help you as a resource. I do this during the normal 14-week school year as well, but especially since you guys have only been doing this for 5 weeks now, just barely, and some of you have never even done music before. I'm just taking a look at this, making sure, you can easily battleship what you have. Oh, I have 3 notes. I know that that's a triad, and I know that my 3rd is in the bass. Okay, well, if you have a triad and you know that your 3rd is in the bass, boom, boom, you know that you have to put a 6 next to it. a disclaimer in this table, in this diagram. All of the examples are written with a 5 chord. You could put, if you had a 2 chord in first inversion, you had a third in the bass, right? You would write a 2-6. So really the main thing that you're looking for in these is, do I have anything next to my Roman numeral? And those are the Arabic numerals that you will write next to your Roman numeral. Another thing to stress is that with third inversion, there is no third inversion for triads. Third inversion only exists for 7th chords. I tell my students to take a look at if you have 4 distinct notes, or if like one is, missing and omitted. If you have 4 distinct notes, then you have a 7th chord. If you have 3 notes, but you have a 7th above the root, then you have a 7th chord as well. So those are like 2 different ways to notice the 7th chord. And you have slightly different Arabic numerals for that. For the 7th chords, my AP music theory teacher told me to remember it kind of like a phone number, like 765-4342. In terms of like the Arabic numerals, for you to remember that. So that's how I remember those. And then just the triads, I just memorized them because I've had to do it so many times. But you're allowed to use that chart as an example. So, let's see. This is extra. This is exercise 11B. Which I will post an answer key for you to do if you would like to practice it. But essentially, what it's having you do is practicing writing your open position notes from open position to closed position. So if I have a G, an E, right, I have a C sharp, so C sharp, E, G, and A, right? I'm going to move that G so that's in a better spot. And if I look here and I'm writing this, my goal is to have everything stacked in thirds. So now you can really see my root is not in the bass. My C sharp is furthest from the bass. This is my soprano line. But if I look here, I have a root, I have a third, a fifth, and a 7th. And my 5th is a G, right? So what is it called when you have your 5th in the bass? That's second inversion. And over here we have, do we have a triad or a 7th chord? Right here we have a 7th chord, because you have the 7th above the root and the bass. Or you have the 7th above the root found in the key. So that's all this exercise is doing, having you practice that. Looking, I have an E, G, C, and another C. Okay, well, I know that this is a triad, right? We only have 3 notes, and I know... I have my third in the bass, right? You have a root, a third, a fifth. You have thirds in the bass. This is second inversion. Hold up. I'm so sorry. I said that my 5th was in the bass. This is first inversion. First. Oh my goodness. So next to this, I would write, for whatever Roman numeral, my Arabic numeral would be 6 next to it. And for this, if I was in second inversion with my 5 in the bass, I would have 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 would be my Roman numerals next to it. Then over here we have an A, you have an F sharp, so I'm going to do F sharp, A, D, and a C, right? I'm just essentially trying to stack thirds wherever I can. So over here you have D, F sharp, A, and C. I know that this is a 7th chord. Right, and then, I'm looking, I have an A, right? D, F sharp, A, that's my 5th, my root, 3rd, 5th, and 7th. My 3rd is in the bass, my 5th is in the bass, making this a second inversion. And because it's a 7th chord, we'd have to write what numerals, Arabic numerals, next to whatever Roman numeral I wrote for my chord. You would write a 6, 5. Wait. Hold up, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. My brain is on scatter mode right now, so I apologize for that. But I will post up 11B in a answer key for you to follow along with your work if you would like to do that as well. And this is also the an extra part of it where you can write down the chord with the Arabic numeral next to the Roman numeral. So you can give that a shot if you would like. Exercise 11C contains content from this lecture. For more practice, you may choose to do exercises 11D and E as well, which the answer keys are provided on Brightspace for that. I somehow did not put 11C on here, so just please give me 1 second. 11C, right? And if I were to open this, this is 11C, and essentially we have here in a major key, you have C major, and you also have, oh my goodness, you also have E minor, right? So essentially what you're doing here is you're going to do a harmonic analysis of them both, and you are going to write in the chords that work for each pitch, I guess, so like writing down the right Roman numerals, right? So the first thing that we're going to do for both of them is open position, what we have written, to a closed position. You're going to see what you have in the bass, what scale degree is in the bass, or not what scale degree, I guess, what part of triad chord is in bass after you find the chord. So I guess that should be step 3. So step 2, find the chord, the Roman numeral, what part of that is in the bass, and then write that out. So you have here, you have a B, you have a D, you have a G, and you have another D, right? So we're in C major. I'm just going to write out C, D, E, F, G, A, B, right? And then I have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 diminished, right? So I'm looking here and I'm like, G, I know that that's a 5 chord, right? Because I'm built on a G. And I like that you can see right here, well, you have a B, right? Is the B the root of your chord? No. We are getting the Roman numeral from our root position part of our closed chord. So I recommend, you don't have to do this if you're really good at it, but I strongly recommend that you're writing your closed position chord so that you're able to find the Roman numeral. So we get the Roman numeral from the closed position chord, right, which is the G, and then we get the Arabic numeral from what part of my chord is in the bass. So this is where we get the Arabic number, and then this is the Roman numeral, which I guess just comes straight from that. So we have a 5 chord, we have a third in the bass, right? If I were to label this root, third, fifth. We have a third in the fifth, and we have a triad. So we have a triad with third in the bass. I know that this is in first inversion. I know then that I will write a 6 next to my note. We are not going to count this note in our analysis. So right now we have an A, we have an E, we have a C, and we have another E, right? So right now I'm like, cool, we have another triad, and if I'm looking here, I have an A, and the A is built off of my 6th scale degree, which gives me my 6th chord, right? And we could double check that. We have an A, C, and E, which is definitely a minor chord. We have a triad. It is in root position. There's the root, and it is in the bass. So we don't have to do anything else. So here we have an F, we have another F, you have an F and an A. We're going to assume that that C is there, right? So you have an F, A, and C. And essentially what we're looking to do is say, is our root in the bass, which yes it is, and we're in the key of C major, so that has to be a 4 chord. We have a triad in root position. Over here, we have a G, we have a C, we have an E, and a G, right? So I'm just going to move this G from down here to up here. If I'm looking, I have a root, I have a third, and a fifth. I don't have a 7th above, there's no B, right? So if I'm looking, I have C, E, and G. What would my Roman numeral be? Remember that you're finding your Roman numeral from moving to open to a closed position, and your closed position has C as your root, right? So we know this is a C major, and you have a 1 chord, right? Boom. Now, if we're looking, we have the 5th in the bass, right? So what's that called? second inversion. And that means that the third is in the bass. Or, sorry, the fifth is in the bass. And I would write this as 6-5. And then over here, if I went, the last example for major, I have G, B, D, and F, right? So here we clearly have a 7th chord. And I clearly have my G in the bass, which is my 5th. So that means that we have a second inversion, 7th chord. I'm going to find my root from my closed position, which I know is G, which is my root. We have the root in the bass. Yeah, you have a 7th chord. It's in root position. You don't have a 5th in the bass. I was just thinking 5. We got the 5 from the closed position. So let me know if this doesn't make sense for you. I'll do the minor version down here for the first time of it to get you kind of going. So the first thing I'm going to do, since we are in minor, is think about what is my 1/2 step below this, which for E, you have a D sharp is my 7th scale degree. So we know that we're going to see those raised D sharps, and we know that those are going to be either 5 chords, 7 chords. Really, that's what we have. That will have that. So we do the same thing here. It's the same premise of you wanting to make a closed position triad. So you have a G, you have an E, you have a B, and you have another G. So in my mind, I'm saying, okay, E, G, B, right? That makes sense. I have all of my notes all checked out, right? So you have E, G, and B. I know this is a minor triad. If I looked, I had E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, E, and I'm not even going to put my C sharp because that doesn't exist because we are in harmonic minor. So 1, 2, half diminished 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, diminished 7, and then tonic, right? Oh my goodness. So if I'm looking over here, we have another E, right? An E minor chord. So it's another 1 chord, but we have a root, we have a 3rd, and a 5th. And if I'm looking here, my 3rd, G is in the bass, which means that I have a triad, right? And 3rd is in the bass. First inversion. Then over here you have a D sharp, you have an A, you have a B, and you have an F sharp. If we're looking here, well, I know anything built on a B is built off of my 5 chord. So I'm looking at this closed position chord, and that's how I'm getting my Roman numeral 5, right? So I know that this is a 5 chord. And then I'm going to say, is my root 3rd, 5th, or 7th in the bass? And if we're looking, our 7th is in the bass, which means that it's in 3rd inversion, which means that we have a 5-4-2 chord. Here we have an F, we have an A, we have a B, and a D sharp. So you have B. Oh, I'm reading in the wrong clef. Oh my goodness, how embarrassing. You have B, D, F sharp, and A. You have a D sharp that's written in, which we know this can either be a 5 chord or 7th chord. So you have B, D sharp, F sharp, and A, which is your 7th, right? So you have root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. Your 7th is in the root. Again, we just switched up the notes, so it should be 5-4-2 again. Then you have 2 G's, a B, and a G. We're going to assume that the D is there. And a G in minor. E minor is going to be a 3 chord, right? There's nothing to look at because our root is in the bass. Then over here you have a B, you have an F, you have a D sharp, and you have another F sharp, right? So if we look, we have a B, D sharp, and F sharp. B is a 5 chord. Here we don't have the 7, we don't have an A anywhere written, so it's just a 5 chord, right? And if we're looking, we know that this is a triad, and I want to say, is the root, third, or fifth in the bass? What we know a root would be a B, and we have an F sharp in the bass, so we have a third, which means that since we have a triad and the fifth is in the bass, we have to write 6-5 next to it. So that's how we get that. And I'll let you figure out the rest of this on your own. So, gentle reminder that you're following this with, oh my goodness. You're following this with chapter 11 in the textbook. And if you wanted to, you can look at the answer keys for 11B, D, and E, which I will post probably on Tuesday or Wednesday, so that you're able to do that and look at it if you would like to. So please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next module.